our industry is strange in the sense that there's so much residential construction work happening, but there's so little foundational stuff for it. You know, there's no standardized construction school where
Right.
In comparison to something like a union shop where as an apprentice you do coursework at night to become a journeyman. Like for us, it's like, I worked with this person, I learned a little here, worked with this person, learned a little here. Some people are more self-educators than others.
Right.
And so it's tough working without a net like this.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk podcast, our regular discussion with building industry professionals. Today I'm joined by Jon Beer of Jon Beer Contracting in Cornwall, New York. This is Fine Homebuilding contributing editor and production manager at TDS Custom Construction, Ian Schwant. You can find the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk podcast and the original Fine Homebuilding podcast at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. You can leave feedback and ask questions there too. Jon, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So Jon, tell us about your contracting business. Lots of employees. What type of work do you do? What can people expect from Jon Beer Contracting?
Yeah, so we're kind of small. Right now it's 6 of us, 5 people in the field, myself included, with one kind of project manager, operations manager person. So we are a design build company. We self-perform almost all that we do, with the exception of mechanicals, some insulation, roofing, that kind of thing. So we are based about an hour north of New York City, in the Hudson Valley. We generally handle like 2 to 3 projects at a time. Generally, there's a decent amount of like remodeling and renovation work that we do, mostly residential. We're starting to get into some ground up work. We're doing a lot of additions, heavy on the kind of framing side.
So how did you come to start your business? Because you're not originally a trade guy, right?
Correct. Yeah. So I started my business in October of 2017. So we're coming up on 5 years, on 8 years. Oh God, it's been a long day. We're coming up on 2017 on 6 years. My background is fine art, which some people know. So I went to undergrad and to grad school for painting, fine art painting. Still, I'm a practicing painter. Still have a studio, and so a few years after grad school, I had the opportunity to look at houses in this area, in the Newburgh area where I live now, which is an hour straight north from New York City. I was looking for a place to have a studio. I wanted to become a landlord and generate some passive income, and had heard about Newburgh as this place where, there were all these old decrepit houses. They were pretty inexpensive. And in, fast forward 6 months, I had bought a large house, 7,000 square feet, Queen Anne Victorian, with my then partner. And we moved up here and started renovating, became landlords. Had no clue what we were doing. At the time I had a drill and a driver and a little chop saw, and I had built one wall in my studio. It was a total trial by fire. So since then, bought a second building, and eventually started to need to work a little bit. And I worked as a helper for a local carpenter, about 2 years or so with him on and off, doing mostly historic restoration work, porches, windows, that kind of thing. Eventually we parted ways. and I started out on my own, really small. Initially I did a lot of plaster repair. I then kind of got into trim, started teaching myself that, did my first kitchen. And then around that point, I brought on my first employee. And I worked with another person, a variety of people, but it was just two of us for about 2 years. And then slowly grew 2 to 3, fluctuating 3 to 4. And then, it was really this beginning of this year that we grew to 6 people.
What was it like restoring that old house in Newburgh? I'd looked at a few of those with people over the years while I lived in the Hudson Valley, and I remember one that was just an awesome house, and then we figured out what it would cost to heat the thing, and that immediately, it was another like 7,000 or 8,000 square foot house, beautiful corner lot, and it's like, man, this is probably like several $1,000s a month to heat. What was that like to dig into one of those homes?
I can tell you, like, the first day I moved and I was trying to go to sleep, it was like the hottest day of the year, and I remember feeling like the whole weight of the house on my chest. Like, what did I get myself into? But the first year we learned a lot, heating specifically, right? Like, it was a crash course on air sealing. And we were able to take this heating bill for the year, which was like, $9,000 the first year, bring it down to about $5,000, just air sealing. So, it was a lot of learning. And luckily this house was in pretty good condition. It had one previous owner. But you start to learn about all the different parts of it, like how it was built, the construction methods that went into it. Where do you find matching materials or similar materials? You start to get into some of the millwork aspects, which on a contemporary house really only live in the inside. But on an old house, they're out inside and out. You have a cornice with crown molding and bed molding, and a buildup of 4 to 8 pieces to create this architectural detail. And I, at one point, about a year after working for this local carpenter, our other building needed the cornice repaired, and it was like my biggest solo carpentry project, taking it apart and then taking it apart from physically, but also drawing all the molding out and trying to recreate what the architecture of everything based on the rotted pieces that were left, and then put it back together. And it was like super nuts for me to just attempt that, and then it felt great to finish it.
Right.
It was hard.
So you spoke about the air sealing aspect with the heat. Is that where your interest in high performance building came from?
I think it maybe planted a seed in the back of my head. It's probably been an interest that's grown slowly, mostly by working on these older houses. A lot of our area, the housing stock is 1890 to 1920. So doing a kitchen renovation for a client, we're always trying to improve the space for them in some way. So, you start to introduce better methods of air sealing, like new framing or a wall that you open up. And, after a period when we started to get into more of the new construction aspect of additions and stuff, you have this amazing opportunity to do it right from the beginning, and choose what are your materials going to be. There were no wall assemblies in 1890. It was true 2x4s and plaster and lath and cladding or brick. And now we have this option to say to a client, hey, we're doing this project for you. We're building you this new space. Let's spend a little money and time and plan out how we can make this space serve you well for the next 30 years or 20 years or till you move. And so I think for me, performance building came about as more of an interest related to trying to give my clients something better for their money than what was there before, and learning along the way how to do that. like the science aspect, the materials aspect of it.
And learning how all of those come together. And now you're in a position where you have employees working with you in the field. You have to teach those same things too, and hopefully plant those same seeds of interest. How's that been going through your career path now and having employees?
It has been a challenge. I mean, I think a good one. I never imagined that I would spend so much time thinking about what's the best way to show people things physically, like how to do them, but what's also the best way to give people feedback. What's the best way to like bring a team together? You know, I never thought I would be spending so much time thinking about it, but I think about it all the time now. So coming to this point, where, you know, in my career in January, I was like, okay, it's a new year. I want to take a lot of what I've learned over the last 5 years and put it into like one place. So I wrote an employee handbook to try and distill some of these ideas about, you know, how do I want, like, what skills do I think are important for people to know at a variety of levels? What levels of carpenter do I want in my company? You know, I realized at one point, like, oh, maybe I'm like losing people because they can't see a path for themselves here, like a trajectory. So, you know, and I was like, oh, in a, you know, larger company, you would have this, like, you start here and then you move up to here and move up to here. And I was like, well, why can't we have that? So I took a lot of those ideas and fleshed them out, and really tried to make it something also interesting to look at and not too micromanagery, and provide some structure to people about what their place in the company could be, provide some structure and process to like how I would like the day to go as a boss and as someone in the field, like leading people. Like, how do we start our day? Oh, like with music, you know, I'm horrible about putting it on. I want someone to put music on first thing in the morning. We go to the whiteboard, we go through what we got to do for the day. You know, we end the day with the whiteboard, cleaning up, like all those sort of thoughts. I tried to distill into one place.
Where does the interest in those procedures come from for you? They come off as something I've experienced in like corporate commercial construction, but where did you get exposed to those and get the idea to bring them to your residential remodeling crew?
So it's probably a twofold thing. The first is, you know, as an owner, like when it's your business, you're the owner operator, things always come back to you, right? And when you're doing estimating and design and you're talking with clients, and most of that important information that is relevant to your team, when that continues to live just with you in your head or in your email or in your notebook, you have no real ability to share that burden with your team. So some of it was intuitive in that sense. Like, how do I take this out of my head or off my plate and allow my team to become more part of what we do? And then the other aspect, you know, the other kind of introduction to this way of thinking about it was really through my wife. She is a senior R&D manager at a pharmaceutical disinfectant company that has they're not huge, about 1,000 people, and they have a pretty well thought out corporate structure. And I was like, well, if I can borrow from that in some light ways, you know, it's easy to go too far, I think. So that's sort of what I'm trying.
Yeah, you make a good point about how easy it is to take some of that stuff too far. I was talking to somebody about purchase orders and how we purchase order our big orders of lumber. And they were like, well, you don't make them get a purchase order for the stuff that they go pick up at the lumber yard on the way to work. And I'm like, no, that'd be nuts.
Yeah.
You know, that's taking it too far. And I think there's a lot of opportunities to, you know, take some of those procedural things and make them more of a burden than they are something that helps.
100%. Yeah. And I think I wanted to put some of these things into words so that my team could know what I think about and why, and what I think, and the way that some of those structures like help us be more successful and continue to build our reputation. And at the same time, like there were some great things that came from like this corporate environment, like employee reviews, like
Yep.
at first it sounds so like, oh God, I have to do an employee review, but like taking 25 minutes to sit down with each member of the team twice a year or 3 times a year, is great. And like to have a candid conversation when you're not working and like all you're here to do is talk and listen. And we started with that with employee reviews. And I tried to introduce the handbook in January, and everything kind of like hit the fan. I had an employee go out on an injury who's still recovering. And then we had like almost everyone in the company, it was 3 of us then. One person, 2 people left. My guy cut his finger and is out, and then one person stayed, and then we hired 4 new people.
Wow.
So I was like, all right, I need to like put this on hold a little bit, and we just recently brought the handbook back out last week.
Let's talk a little bit more about your handbook. You're a prolific poster on Instagram, and you kind of did a page turn of that for your followers on Instagram stories. But
Sure.
Just for the listeners, talk through some of the stuff that you included in there and why you think it's important.
Yeah. So I started with our values. I wanted to make sure I knew what those were. And that's the real beginning of it. So that's craftsmanship, respect, transparency, and efficiency. Honesty and efficiency. So those 4 things are fairly self-explanatory. But general like respect of each other, respect of our clients' houses. We're transparent, try to be transparent, and not honesty, it's communication. Communication, like kind of is a big umbrella term, being clear with each other, with our clients, with subs, et cetera. So values are kind of the big first part. Then identifying our crew roles and how they exist, like the trajectory that exists for that. So starting with an apprentice, carpenter 1, carpenter 2, lead carpenter. Each of those roles is then broken out further into like responsibilities, skill set, compensation, and benefits. So benefits are like equal to all people at all role levels. So like for us, we're a small company. I can't afford health insurance for my employees, but we do offer paid holidays. We're starting a PTO plan this year that's based on kind of time with the company, and then the longer you're with the company, the higher your accrual rate. I'm try to be really flexible with the guys. Keep like we're 8 to 4, Monday to Friday. Some team members have some family, things they need to work around. We're flexible with them for that. So roles, trajectory. Then it gets into like skill set. So skill sets broken down by kind of trade. So for instance, like sheetrock or framing. In each category, there's a helper level, basic level, advanced level, and then those are each broken down into comprehension, execution, independence. So, I kind of created this grid. So, if you're a carpenter 1, I would expect you to be able to have comprehension, execution, and independence of basic sheetrock. So that would be like hanging and taping, but advanced level might include like riglets and special details. So every skill has that like developed kind of body of information behind it. And I struggled for a long time to figure out, what does basic sheetrock mean? And this
Right.
week I was like, screw this. I'm not going to figure it out by myself. Let's figure it out as a team. So we took a bunch of skills and with the whiteboard went through. I was like, guys, what do you think should be in basic window and door install, basic framing, whatever. So we're going to continue to develop that curriculum for ourselves. That's like the meat of it is values, trajectory, skill set. Then there's process stuff, daily practices, how and everything is very visual. So it's like, I feel like reading all this stuff is so boring and makes it even more corporate. But like, I spent a lot of time to try and make like the graphic aspect of it interesting. So daily practices, like what are the critical things that we need to do each day that happen around whatever the work is?
Right.
Meeting at a whiteboard, going over our task list, talking with clients, etc., cleaning up, being ready for the next day, weekly process, monthly and yearly. And then from there, it's general expectations about, tool usage, like time off, PTO, safety, that kind of stuff.
And it gives you a good basis for your reviews and your check-ins with your team too, right? Because you can always refer back to the things in the handbook and values and roles and responsibilities. Without having those things, it's really hard to give somebody a good review, because otherwise you're just the boss who comes in and says, you're not doing good enough because I said so,
right?
Or you're doing great because you're my buddy.
Right. And the history for, like good or bad like, I hate even using the word performance, but like, if you have someone that's working and doing a great job, and then you have another employee that's like having a kind of a difficult month, like it's hard with so much going on to remember and look back and say like, hey, what's been going on lately, versus like, hey, in July we set these goals together for you for the year. Where do you feel like you're at?
Yeah, and I've found that when you ask somebody that question, they're usually a lot tougher on themselves than you're going to be tough on them as an employer. They're going to be more introspective to where they feel like they are on the career path or on their set goals for the year than you are, because you're managing that on 5 or 6 people and they're really self-managing it.
Right. Yeah, I think accountability is important, and leads to like personal growth in employees, and also gives them confidence, and and the whole team grows if everyone is having that experience. We all grow together and become more of a unit. And I don't know, this kind of stuff is so hard to learn about.
It's hard to go out and find it. There's a lot of places that you can go and dig into it, and things like JLC Live, which I know you've been involved in, and other things that you can read, Fine Homebuilding, other magazines and books. But it is really challenging to find a place that you can learn how to put it in practice.
Definitely. When our industry is strange in the sense that it's very like there's so much work, residential construction work happening, but there's so little foundational kind of stuff for it. There's no standardized construction school where
Right.
In comparison to something like a union shop where as an apprentice you do coursework at night to become a journeyman. Like for us, it's like, I worked with this person, I learned a little here, worked with this person, learned a little here. Some people are more self-educators than others. Right. And so it's tough working without a net like this.
Yeah. So you're also taking on a pretty big project now with your team that's actually part of Fine Homebuilding's website stuff. You're the owner builder of the Fine Homebuilding House 2023 in the same way that I was in 2021. What's that experience been like to balance that on top of, I'm sure, having to maintain some paid work to keep the ship afloat?
Yeah. It has been Like nothing I've ever done before, I guess is the first way to answer it. So, in total transparency with everyone listening, like this is our first full gut house renovation plus big addition plus ground up build for the shop all at the same time. We've done all the components individually on different jobs. Putting them all together has been fantastic. It's super enjoyable at times, super stressful, especially spending a ton of money. And like, for us, it still makes the most sense to do the work in house because it's the most affordable way. And we're very
Sure.
lucky to have that resource. But the money stress is definitely difficult. There are a lot of moving parts and a lot of new things for us. Just, whether it's like the first time, like I installed metal, exposed fastener metal roofing on the shop, like never done it before. Okay, let's try
Right.
it. And then, okay, let's try to get it done in 2 days. Like we're still trying to keep things on track and be conscious of our timeline and of our budget. But it has been super fun and very rewarding.
You had to build a bridge to get to your site. I mean, come on, metal exposed fastener, metal roofing. You already had to build a bridge.
Yeah, I knew my limits. That was something we hired out. But yeah, I mean, we put in a bridge rated for 40 tons to get to the house, to cross, a 12-foot wide stream. But yeah, it's been challenging. So we have the house was originally a 1,200 square foot ranch on 2 acres, single story, abandoned for 10 years. We took that in November, ripped the roof off after Thanksgiving, added an 800 square foot second story. It's 2 offices, primary bedroom, primary bathroom, primary closet. Downstairs is 2 bedrooms. We added a 18 by 18 single story addition off the back of the house. And that's like a large living room. And then in March, we dug and poured the foundation for a 1,200 square foot shop and painting studio. So it'll be my studio and it'll be the shop for the company. We started framing that in April and had the structure up in about 9 days. And over the lifespan of the project, we went from a crew of four people to a totally new crew of 6. So like the shop was our first ground up structure with this new crew. It's like everything has been new in one way or the other, even if we've done parts of it before.
So what parts of the build are you most excited about sharing with not just listeners of the podcast, but people who are going to go onto the website and take a look at it and watch the videos and see the other content put out?
I think like personally, the framing aspect is the most satisfying part for me. Like I, in the design process of the build, I really was trying to avoid a second story. I had never done like a full second story. We've done a couple of additions. I don't love being high up. I don't like being on a roof. And the logistics associated with like, picking up those walls, like that's fine. But like cladding the roof and siding, 35 feet up at the ridge, like I'm not super comfortable with that.
Sure.
But, my wife was like, I think it's really important we have a second story, important for the design of the house. And we went with it. And I'm so glad we did because it's awesome. But I think some of the really interesting details are happen in that framing period where we're literally like connecting a new structure to a 70-year-old structure.
Right.
People, I myself included, you see, it built in 1956. It's not that old. It's, 75 years old, 70
right.
years old.
And it was abandoned for 10 years, right?
Right. So you're dealing with like a whole different level of a whole different kind of construction. that's just a puzzle to figure out. And then taking that and adding on to it, and then bringing the entire structure up to not just current codes, but a level of performance that is great. We're shooting for less than 1 ACH for our blower door test, and it'll be the first blower door test we've ever done. So high bar.
Yeah. You're going to do a pre-installation blower door so that you can.
Yeah, so we're doing like a pretty thorough air seal pre-installation. A lot of like spray foam. We're working with Loctite as a sponsor, and so we'll do a pre-installation blower door, and we'll share that number.
Yeah, those tend to be the best ways for you to chase some of those big missed opportunities, because if you wait until you bury it in insulation, man, that can take you forever to chase some of those holes.
For sure.
I remember I got my blower door was about 0.6.
Wow.
And I, like 2 days after the blower door, I found that I had not taped like 2 or 3 of the exterior outlets. So I had these big gaping holes to the outside. And all I could think of was, man, what would I have been if I would have gotten those?
Right.
So what was the decision to remodel instead of build new? Was there a driver in that decision?
So we bought in February of 2021. So quite a long time ago. And we started looking even before that. I think for me, it was just a comfortability thing. Like I wasn't ready to do a ground up house.
Right.
I think I could have, but I wasn't feeling confident enough. And we also, like I didn't exclude land and lots from our search, but we didn't really find anything that like jumped out at us in the locations we were looking for. But, of course, the minute I saw this house that had been owned by the bank and abandoned for 10 years, like I went for it.
Yeah. So what about the shop build? You mentioned that it's going to be part shop, I assume, for the business, and then also a painting studio. How did you go about constructing this, and what's the general design of it?
So it's one building that looks like two is kind of the best way to describe it. There are, if you were to split it like 40-60, 40% of the building would be the painting studio, 60% the shop. It is fairly tall. It's one story. The shop ceiling height averages around 12 feet. The studio, it's a single shed style roof. And then the studio is a gable, vaulted ceiling, 9-foot plate height. So the top of the bottom of the ridge is like around 11 feet. Very open. The studio doesn't have any windows in it. It has 2 skylights and a glass door. I wanted a lot of wall space to work. And then the shop is similar. We have 2 windows, like crank out casements, and then 2 massive doors we just installed. A friend custom made them for us. They're steel in-swing doors with glass. They are 11.5 feet tall, and each leaf is 5 feet wide. So the opening is big enough to drive the van into.
Cool.
It's the outside is pretty interesting. The shop is clad in vertical black metal siding. It has like an overhang that we built around it in white metal. And then the studio, the gable roof is the white, same matching white metal roofing. And then the siding is something I've wanted to do for a long time. It's an open joint cladding with a core event rain screen behind it. And it's made out of 1x6 green rough sawn hemlock from a local mill that we stained on site.
Cool.
So it looks like both rustic and contemporary at the same time. It's very exciting.
Is that siding similar to the other siding that you used on the house?
The siding on the house is going to be mixed. Some of it is 1x6 spruce shiplap from the same local mill that we stained. It's a vertically oriented. And then the other siding should be arriving soon is a 1x6 Shusugiban charred siding from Nakamoto Forestry. So same profile, different texture and color.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to be interested to see how that comes together and gets installed, and what the finished look of that siding is.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. You know, we have this kind of atypical scenario. The new parts of the house are all 2x6 framing with zip sheathing. So, you know, throw the core event rain screen on over that and no big deal. But as the second story changes to the first story, we switch over to this existing veneer brick cladding, where it's like, well, how do you nail siding to bricks? So I've started to mock up that detail. I think what we're going to end up doing is core event screwed directly to the veneer brick with a pitched composite furring strip on top of the core event that we can nail to. But it'll all, you know, come down to the day we start getting ready to do it and see how it all works.
Right. Sometimes with details like that, you can draw it out and then looks great when you're done drawing it, and then it's totally different when you guys are there putting it up in the field, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So where do you see the future of residential construction going? You know, you came into it not all that long ago and came into it from a different place than most people.
Well, it's a big question. It seems that at least in our little world of building, you know, high performance is taking off and becoming very popular. I've also seen a lot of growth in modularization. You know, Airbnb and COVID really changed the landscape for residential building in a lot of ways. I think of what clients are looking for, or how clients are looking to maybe develop alternative income. So seeing a lot of like contemporary small format prefab building going up. I think, you know, there's also a housing crisis that we're dealing with. So the question of how do you retrofit existing housing stock to serve the community of people that exist is also a big question mark for the residential construction industry. Personally, you know, we're trying to develop the company in two directions. One, to serve the renovation remodeling community. There's a great need for that, and I think it's something that with the right team you can produce consistent quality results and serve your local area well. I'm also interested in affordable high performance building. You know, just as the nature of how we work with clients, we're cost plus, 100% transparent, heavy pre-construction. We do a lot of value engineering. So it occurred to me one day, well, if I can value engineer a kitchen for a client and try and give them the most for what their budget is, why can't I do that from a high performance standpoint? And it's, you know, I knew right away it would come with compromises as far as like what we can offer. So it was like, all right, take basements off the table, reduce the square footage of the building, you know, use alternative foundation methods instead of poured concrete frost walls,
right,
larger footings, and maybe some small steel. You know, and how do I try and bring this? Like, it maybe seems so counterintuitive. Instead of like thinking of how do I charge the most for something, my thought was, how do I bring the whole cost of a house down to give someone who is trying to buy their first house an opportunity to actually do it and have it not be this thing that needs to be updated, but right, you know, by 40 years of technological and material development, you know. So I'm designing our first one right now with a client. We're shooting to build a 1,500 square foot, 2-story contemporary house for under 470. And we're at about 480 right now, budgeting. and we are just about ready to bring in an architect colleague to help us start doing construction drawings. But I did a preliminary design and preliminary budgeting to make sure we were kind of on track. Their house has taken my initial design and added some of their own kind of wants and needs. So that's impacted the budget a little bit, but yeah, it's exciting to see this, getting a chance to take the words and turn them into actions.
Sure. That's a great way to try and have an impact, not just on the people that interact with your business, but just the industry in general with the amount of content that you post. And I know you threw out there into the Instagram universe a few times when you were conceptualizing what you might be able to build at that time, I think you were talking about a passive house or some other type of high performance home, but it's cool that you've got a client that was interested in going down that path with you.
So I will say, it's important to take risks. So this person came to me with a basically fully fleshed out design from another architect. They said, this is what we want to build, that we have the land already. And here's the design. And I said, this is, going to cost you double what you have for a budget.
Right.
And I said, I have this idea. I've never, full disclosure, we've never developed it farther than a discussion. Do you want to try to develop this together and pay me to do it? And so they were like, yeah, sure. And so, we've been working together since, I want to say, February, maybe. Trust is a huge thing. And it certainly wouldn't be able to do this if we didn't have that with clients. But we'll see what happens.
That's good stuff. It's been great having you on the podcast. And I think we all look forward to seeing the FHB House 2023 stuff get posted over the next 12 months. And is there anything else you want to say to the listeners before we sign off?
I think the first episode should be coming out pretty soon, so stay tuned for that. And as always, if anyone has questions or wants to know more about what we do or the handbook or the house, shoot me a DM. I love connecting with people.
So Jon, thanks for taking time to join me today, and thanks to everybody for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us wherever you're listening. It helps others find the podcast. Thanks again, everybody.